Richard Skipper celebrates. Every show is a celebration. Each show, Richard delivers the artists you love, showcasing what makes them unique. Never gossipy. The antidote to a sometimes hectic world. Now, here's your host, Richard Skipper.
Happy Thursday, everyone, and welcome to the latest edition of Richard Skipper Celebrates. This is the show in which I celebrate artists and their body of worth. What makes a great artist? How do they get from point A to point B and beyond? I'm very excited when I get the opportunity to sit down and celebrate all of the great artists that I love and admire. It's even better when I get to sit down and chat and talk with someone that I call friend, and that's Fred Barton. I've known Fred since the early 80s in New York. We'll talk about that a little later. I first became familiar with him when he hit the scene with Miss Gulch Returns, which was a huge off-Broadway hit. But before I bring Fred on, I'm just going to give you all a sample of some of the things that Fred is known for, and then we will bring him on. Sit back, enjoy, and in a moment, meet Fred Barton.
I'm gonna raise the roof. I'm gonna carry on. Give me that old trombone. Give me that old baton before the parade passes by.
That with the pedal, I love the metal. Not only music from Broadway. I'm so delighted when I'm invited to hear a long-haired genius play. Oh,
Let me croon a load on blues to lift you out of your seats. And if my song can reach your shoes and start you tapping your feet, and the beat are up
and
down
what's more,
with a
I'm
velvet rope. There is nothing you can take
twinkle
to
in the
relieve
skies
that
are twinkling in
You're not
my
sick,
eyes.
you're just
I wonder
in
why
There
stars
is
that
nothing you
used
can
to
take
twinkle
to
in the
relieve
skies
that
are
pleasure.
twinkling
You're not
in
sick,
my
you're
eyes.
just
I wonder
in
why.
If you will play the harmony, then the good old-fashioned harmony. And that is simple. I wanna listen to
Play for me, old-fashioned harmony. Won't you play for me? That's good old-fashioned
You are a woman.
You are man. Let's kiss.
Those ants that invaded my pants, fini. Bewitched, bothered, and bewildered. No
Till that lucky day, you know darn well, baby, I can't give you anything. I can't give you anything. I can't give you anything. But love.
And me, the conductor, and there you are. If Josephine had left a Napoleon and climbed in my lap, I would say go back to nap. I'd rather lead her back. I'd rather lead her back.
And there you are. I'm getting a little bit of an echo from you, so I don't know what's going on there. But how are you, first of all, in the midst of this crazy world that we find ourselves in right now?
I'm doing okay, especially now that we're beginning to see some signs of life. I wouldn't say I was a poster boy for good adjustment at the beginning. I mean, many of my friends and people we know were jumping online immediately to do their club act in last March and April, and I couldn't even think about that.
Mm-hmm.
I just could not get into that. And applause for those who could, but I just folded up. And eventually I did 2 numbers for Sandy Durrell's site, and she talked me into it. And I'm glad she did, because it made me do something. I hadn't played the piano in a couple months. I hadn't sung at all. And she made me do it, and I just thought, I probably should do this. So I'm glad she sort of cattle prodded me into singing a little again and playing a little again. And just now I'm beginning, people are doing their cabaret acts now, all of a sudden.
Yeah. Do you think it's too soon?
I don't think it's too soon, because they're all following certain rules, like you can't fill the house.
Right.
And the vaccine levels in New York are pretty good. Not great.
I'm hearing on the news, and we'll, mention this, that they think that there's going to be a drop-off in the excitement of people getting the vaccines. And the fact of the matter is, especially here in New York, everybody who's watching this, if you are already vaccinated, or vaccinated, I guess is the word I should say, reach out to your friends that have not been vaccinated so that we can get to the immunity stage quicker than not. That's the important thing right now.
Yeah, California has the best levels of all places. They were in real trouble before, but now they're ahead of New York in terms of beating down the numbers. But I predict that New York City, I don't know about the rest of the state, but New York City will be in good shape as the summer goes on.
I hope so. I certainly hope so. I miss it. Believe it or not, I live 25 minutes north of Manhattan. Yeah. And I have not been in Manhattan since March 10th of last year.
Wow.
So,
and I have been off the island of Manhattan since last year. So
we're like ships that pass in the night.
Yeah, we have to do a show together to get together and chat.
And speaking of which, here's my Candor and Ebb mug, and you were the musical director for this. So
I didn't know there was a mug, or did you make that?
You didn't get a mug?
I did not get a mug.
I owe you a mug. Karen Zamba is on it. Lilius White, Jana Robbins. Yeah, I gotta get you your mug. So yeah, I didn't realize that you didn't get one that day. But I want to ask you that now it's been 404 days since the theater shut down, and of course that means cabaret as well. What did your calendar look like on March 11th of last year?
Oh, I can tell you exactly March 11th. Because I had been, the play The Inheritance had been recommended to me, and I knew absolutely nothing about it. I didn't know what it was about. I didn't know what it was. But I had someone who knows me well, and I only trust people who know me well, say, you have to see this play. And I thought, okay, I don't know, all right, I'll go see the play. And at the end of that week, I was going to LA to see my brother's play. He's a writer, director, etc. in LA. And I had the tickets all set for Friday the 13th. Fine time to fly to LA in a plague. Anyway, so I almost didn't go. I mean, I keep late hours, as you know. I mean, I'm up early to see you today. But I dragged myself out of bed like, okay, because it was the last day I could see the play. It's 2 plays in one. So it's a 7.5 hour, 8 hour commitment.
Exactly.
And so I thought, okay, I'll see the matinee and then I'll see how I feel. I didn't buy both plays.
because I had a bad experience. I was not a fan of Angels in America on Broadway. Not until I saw the HBO version did I sort of tune into that.
Was it because of the length?
No, not because of the length. I just didn't like the play.
Okay.
I didn't get it until I saw the HBO rendition.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So I never went back to see the second half of Angels in America because I didn't like the first half. Mm-hmm. So I thought, okay, there's another really epic gay play, and I'll just see the first half and see how I feel.
Mm-hmm.
And I dragged myself in there with 1,000 other people. I mean, the place was packed. It was the second to last or third to last set of performances that anyone could go see. So I went and sat in the orchestra section. And by the time, I mean, I was a mess already, early in the play, but by the time the Act One coup de théâtre occurred, this amazing event, a theatrical event, occurred in the play. Towards the end of Act One, there's this thing that happens. And you could hear audible, not even sobs, but open cries from random people in the audience, and mostly men of a certain age like me who were there for the early 80s and all that followed. I mean, I came to New York in 1980, so it was before
79.
79, you beat me. But explains why we met when we did. But there was no such, I came to New York, there was no such thing. No one ever heard of such a thing. No. And if you had told us back then, we wouldn't have believed it. If someone tapped you on the shoulder and said, there's going to be a plague that's going to kill hundreds of thousands, much less millions around the world, we would have looked at you as if you were nuts. So here's the end of the Act One of The Inheritance, and it was absolutely devastating. And no one moved. I mean, there was no curtain call. There was no applause, which was sort of to imply there's more. And I went out to the box office, and immediately I thought, oh my God, what if I can't get a seat tonight? You know, the only time I could see the second play. And I got a seat. And I went out onto the street, and I was looking at the iPhone for the news. And I read that an usher in a Broadway theater had been diagnosed. And I remember thinking, oh, that doesn't sound very good. But I was sitting there in the theater all day for 8 hours with 1,000 other people, and none of us thought two things about it. And when I arrived for the second play, I was sitting in the second row of the orchestra, and we were all total strangers. We were all chatting amongst ourselves in the most animated fashion because we were so excited about the play. And what did you think about this? And I don't know what's going to happen now. And blah, blah, blah. And we were all so engaged. And COVID was like barely on our minds. I had only heard a little about it because I had relatives in the medical profession. And even then I was like, well, whatever, just work itself out. And the next day, as we know, they canceled Broadway. They shut it down. So that turned out to be the last performance of The Inheritance. And it was the one that was filmed. So I was actually in the audience during the filming of the play. Wow. And I thought it was easily the finest play I've ever seen. And I've been at this a long time, as you know. In 40 years, I've never seen anything like it.
That's amazing. What a great story.
And you know what I was thinking about The Inheritance? Can you imagine? Like, it's about the previous plague. I mean, it covers some of that ground. And it covers contemporary life and looking back at that plague. Can you imagine if the play was shown now? If they put it on right now? After what we've just been through for a year, the immediacy, like we'd be practically in the play. We just lived the play in the last in the last year. I mean, it would be devastating. I hope when there's a Broadway again that some producer will see that. We'll see that this has a whole new layer of intensity and amazingness. And they should put it on again, limited run, whatever they.
It's amazing because it was such a hit in London, and then it came to New York. And unfortunately, and I know a lot of friends who were investors in this show, they had a lot of trouble finding an audience. And perhaps it was the subject matter, perhaps it was, as you said, you didn't even know what it was about.
Right.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah, I was very puzzled about that because I hadn't read the reviews. I had read nothing about it, heard nothing about it, except for I knew it was around. I knew it was happening. And I had read the pre-publicity, like, oh, there's this play coming from London and it's going to be amazing. And then after I saw it, I thought, what happened here? You know, it was packed when I saw it, but I thought it was a prematurely ended run. Even without COVID, they were ending early. And there's no accounting for these things. Because you know, it was like hailed in London. And fortunately, I will say that it is up for 11 Tony nominations, which is like one short of, I think, as many as anyone's ever gotten.
Exactly.
So, so I'll be curious to see. Not that it makes any difference now, but I'd love it that play to be honored, and it changed my life.
Well, you know, it's interesting. I mean, both of us came to New York at the same time. I'll tell you something, and a lot of people are going to hear me say this, and their mouths are going to drop. When I came to New York in 1979, I did not know, believe it or not, that I was a gay man. And by the time I realized it, and I was comfortable being who I was, and I was living that lifestyle, AIDS was front page news every day. Yeah. And it scared the hell out of me. Yeah. Because there was so much that was unknown about it. We didn't know if it was airborne or with all the other ways that you could get it, that how transmissible it truly was. And I think that fear for those of us who lived through all that are somewhat sensing this again with not knowing exactly how this is transmissible.
You just hit the nail on the head in the sense that when this started last March, it was deja vu. Like, oh, we've done this before, at least some of us. Remembering, oh yeah, we don't know how it's transmitted. We don't know why some people get it like this and some people get it like that. We've done the plague before, you and me and all of us in our generation, which is partly what the play is about, the inheritance. But it felt.
I'm going to ask you a hypothetical question that you don't have an answer for, but I'd love to hear your take.
I will.
Yeah, but do you feel? I mean, let's say that we had social media during the '80s with everything. Do you think that it would have made a huge difference?
Huge, but social media would have made a huge difference in absolutely everything. I mean, one of the problems was how poorly it was covered in the press at the time in the '80s. I mean, Larry Kramer's play
Normal Heart.
Normal Heart covers that.
Had that the same experience that you had with The Inheritance was what I had with the Normal Heart when it moved to Broadway.
I didn't see the original Normal Heart. I saw the Joel Grey directed
That's the one,
which was epic, and Ellen Barkin being sensational. And one of the principal characters is a writer for the New York Times, as I recall. And Larry pulled no punches. I mean, that's partly why he invented ACT UP. Like GMH, he invented a GMHC with his friends, and they had turned into more of a medical care type of organization. And the problem was really political, and then he formed ACT UP. And
what was your take on Larry Kramer at the time that was all happening?
I can tell you exactly the night I found out who Larry Kramer was and what was going on.
The night that he kissed you?
That was good. That was good. Well, I used to eat, once I realized early on, like, I think I might be alone in New York. And I grew up in a family of 10. So dinner time was like 10 people around the table. And there's that moment in New York when you've gone through your whole Rolodex, you've been through all your friends, you've been through everyone you know, and you're going to have to eat alone. I remember that night. And so I used to eat at this cheap place that was so great. Of course, the younger generation has no idea what I'm talking about. The Pizza Joint. Do you remember the Pizza Joint at all? It was on Broadway and 78th Street. Okay. It's been there for 50 years. Big Nick's. And so I ate there all the time because you could get in and out for $10. And I like big pizza and I like all the trimmings. So I ate there all the time. And I was eating there one night, and I picked up a copy of a newspaper, the gay newspaper out of the day in New York called the New York Native.
That's right.
Back when we had newspapers and there was no internet, there was no nothing.
Right.
I picked it up and I always read through it. I appeared in it a number of times when I did my musical.
I did too.
So New York native was great. I miss it.
Right.
And I was just paging through it and eating pizza, like, and I came across this article the title was something like 1,741 and counting. And I was like, 1,740 what? And I read the article, and it was Larry Kramer's first call to arms.
Mm-hmm.
And it was him like blaring as loud as he could in this article, be afraid, take this seriously, be afraid. Now, do you happen to remember last March when people were writing on Facebook and all that, like, take this seriously, my wife just died, and all those posts?
I was one of those people, and I was saying, I was begging the clubs. I actually sent an email to all of the clubs asking them to shut down because I was so concerned about my fellow artists. And a lot of that concern came from living through the 80s.
Yeah. Again, it was deja vu. We've done this before.
Well, the interesting thing, and I ask about social media, because when we lived through that, we didn't have social media. And a lot of times you would just be going around to the clubs, and I was a piano bar baby, as you know, and I'd see you a lot at the piano bars at everything as well. But you would show up and you would say, well, where is so-and-so? I haven't seen them in a while. And then you would be given that devastating news.
Yeah.
And you didn't hear it instantly the way that we hear these things now. And it was just such a...
It was insidious there was no front page except in these, like the famous story of the New York Times barely covering it. I missed the first article, which was in summer 81, like 9 people have died in New York City of this weird thing that nobody knows what it is. And, but that was it. And then it was always page 20 news. And that's partly what Larry Kramer was protesting, that like,
absolutely.
And the New York Times at that time was in the hands of an extremely homophobic editor or publisher. He wouldn't allow the use of the word gay.
I know.
In the New York Times. And that was for the entire decade of the 80s. Can you imagine like trying to cover AIDS and not saying the word gay or like, and they called it with all its clinical terms. I mean, it was a really homophobic setup there. And we had a gay mayor who was in the closet and would not touch the topic. It's a different time and not a pretty one.
No, not a pretty one. Well, I want to talk about prettier things.
Yeah.
You, for example. So I learned 2 things tonight already that I didn't know about you. You're one of 10 children.
Yeah.
And you have a brother who's a playwright.
Yes.
Where did you grow up? Where are you from originally?
I grew up in Lexington, Massachusetts. And my father, he's still with us at 94.
God bless him.
Yeah, is basically the world's radar expert. And so he had moved to the Boston area to work at Raytheon, which is one of the main government radar organizations, companies. And so I grew up in this terrific school system. They had a great music department. I wonder what I would have turned out like if I had been in we lived in Haddonfield before then, outside of Philadelphia. I wouldn't be me if I had grown up outside of Philadelphia. But Lexington, this great music department, all the outlets you could ask for, the shows, the concerts, I could do anything. And I actually sort of became a cabaret performer in high school already. And so when I went to Harvard, and then I got summer stock. I started doing summer stock after my freshman year at Harvard. And they had a late night cabaret. And I was all over that cabaret. I thought, oh my God, people from New York. I'd never met real people from New York. Performers, and they were gorgeous, unlike any place I had ever been before.
Sophisticated.
They were emotionally intelligent. I mean, there's some smarty pants at Harvard, but I didn't find emotionally intelligent people there. And then there were these actors and actresses from New York. Everyone made the effort to look like $1 million every day. And I loved that. So I was like, a fish in water. So then it became like, why am I spending 9 months of the year doing something I hate, which was going to college, and 3 months of the year in heaven, summer stock. And as I reached the end of college, I fell over backwards. I couldn't make up my mind. I didn't think I was good enough for New York. I thought that's where the gods walked. And I was just a good piano player. I knew I was really good, but I didn't know how good. But my friends in Summerstock, I credit them to this day they took me in a corner and said, kid, you're good. You should come to New York. We need people like you. And I was like, I didn't believe it. Aren't there fabulous pianists in New York?
Now, were you doing it all at that time? Were you doing the musical arranging? Were you doing the conducting? Were you doing the singing as well? Or,
I mean, at Theater by the Sea, I became the musical director quickly. Like in the third year, I was there 5 years total. In the third year, I was musical director at 20, which is not on a usual track. And that's partly why I was conducting on Broadway when I was 26. Like I was already head of the class, like ahead of the game. And I did cabaret and that stuff. And as soon as I moved to New York, the first thing I did was a cabaret act. At Ted Hook's, not backstage. Maybe it was
on stage. It was on stage and backstage.
Right. And I was at backstage every night. And you know, New York and those fabulous places, none of which exist anymore. It's a great loss. And we partly owe that loss to the internet, to those phone gadgets. Because back then, as you remember, unless you wanted to stay alone in your apartment, you had to go out.
Oh my God.
It was
you know my story about my life in the piano bars. You know, I had a routine. I would start out at the Monster. I would leave the Monster and I would go to Marie's Crisis. And then I would go to the original Duplex. I would leave the Duplex, go to the Five Oaks, and then I would go to 88's. And if I felt really ambitious.
Because those four were like right next to each other.
Exactly. They were all in that same area.
Right around the corner.
And it was like a street fair because you knew everybody on the street. And then I would get in a cab, because you could afford it then, and go to Don't Tell Mama. Sometimes I would leave Don't Tell Mama and go to Broadway Baby. But there were so many of these places. And I'll tell you something else that changed. With all due respect to the people who work in the piano bars, I always felt when I walked into these piano bars that it was a sense of belonging. It was a sense of family. It was a sense of come up and sing a song or two. Dick Gallagher, Marie Blake, all of these people, that was the way that they operated. They treated it as if they were the host of their party. And then something shifted. And this happened in the 90s. And it was no longer about the patrons. And it was about the staffs performing. And when you got rid of making it about the patrons, the energy, the feel was very different in these clubs.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I didn't work at the piano bars for the longest time. I was all high and mighty with my Broadway and with this, and then I moved to LA, and then I came back. And it was only when I came back to New York after 2 years of LA and Debbie Reynolds, which is a long story I might tell you. But I mean, literally, I spent 2 nights talking with her over wine till 7 in the morning. And I was, here I am telling the story. And she saw that I was depressed. And I basically told her, I watched her perform in her piano bar. She had a piano bar and she ran it. And I was like, Debbie Reynolds is hosting a piano bar? And I looked at her, she was a wonder. Eighth wonder of the world. And I looked at her and she came over to me. She saw something in my face. She said, it's fun, isn't it? And I gushed. I was like, oh my God, Miss Reynolds. Call me Debbie. And then we just drank until dawn. And she told me all her MGM stories. I told her all of my stories because I had a few by then. And she, at one point she said, I told her, look, this has done so much for me. I'm down and out in New York. I'm depressed. How
long were you in New York at this point?
I had been there for 10 years.
Wow.
So now I was living in LA for 2 years, and then I was on the national tour of CAMELOT with Robert Goulet.
I want to come back to the Debbie Reynolds story in just a moment because you were 10 years into the story. No, but I wanted to know how the move to New York happened for you. Did you know people here when you first came here?
I did because of Summerstock, because I had already done 3 seasons of Summerstock. So figure you meet 100 people every season.
Right.
Well, I knew hundreds of people. And not all of them are your best friends, as you know, but I had enough really great friends that it really helped convince me to move to New York. I was not planning on it. As I said, I didn't think I was good enough. I didn't think I'd succeed. I did not come up in a family that did that. We did not move to New York and go into the arts. But I did anyway, just on a wing and a prayer. And I remember telling my parents and my family, like, I don't care if I'm successful or not. I just want to ride the ride. And if I grow up to be, and I have picked it out of the air, 40, if I get to be 40 and it's like a bust, I'll do something else. And so
did you give yourself a timeline?
Well, I had that arbitrary number 40 in my head, but I became successful so early. It's like practically the first thing that happened to me, which was just dumb luck. It was just the craziest thing. And I'm referring to Forbidden Broadway, which happened within my first year of New York. Started to happen. And then like all of a sudden I met every star in the world. Like, who knew that was going to happen? I met my diva of all time, Ethel Merman. I met her, and I practically like turned into a pillar of salt on the ground. I brought one of my albums, and she signed it, and it hangs on my wall to this day. I mean, can you imagine? I met Carol Channing a couple of times because she was a big fan of Forbidden Broadway. And I met them all. Myrna Loy, Joan Bennett. I mean, they all lined up. So, and it was actually because of my first job in New York was, I hated it. It was like the worst job I ever had. It was a joint called Equity Library Theater.
Oh my God, do I miss that?
And I don't miss it, but only because I only had the experience of working there.
Okay.
Which is different from doing a show. Like as an actor doing a show, I was like the music guy, the assistant music guy. And I just had a series of bad experiences and sort of quit in the middle of the year. But I had met an actress named Nora Mae Ling. And a couple months later, she called me to do her club act. And I thought, don't ask me to do your club act. I hate doing club act, all that work, all that rehearsal. There's no money, nobody comes. I just didn't want to do it, but she talked me into it. And boy, am I glad I did it. Because it was a 2-nighter. It's like 2 nights only in November, Forbidden Broadway. And the rest is history.
Well, I've got someone who wants to say hello to you. Ron Spivak says that him, Fred, and they're all watching. So, and I love them dearly. So
I do too. That's great. I actually went to Harvard with Troy.
Oh, that's wonderful! Wow, wow.
And we didn't know each other well then until we like met again in New York. You know how that happens in life. Your ship's passing in the night, and then you meet again years later, and it's a whole new thing.
So Forbidden Broadway happened shortly after you arrived in New York. How long were you in New York before that happened? Or
well, I moved September 80, and we really started Forbidden Broadway in earnest September, October 81. So it was pretty quick. You know, I had that.
It was a great time to be in New York as well.
Yeah.
I mean, you talk about all these celebrities that you met. I mean, think about this for just a moment. A lot of those celebrities were the age that you and I are now when we were.
Here's when the moment I knew I had really moved to New York. And, you know, I moved in September and I went to backstage. I went to all those fabulous places where the actors hung out. Everyone hung out, unlike now. And I mean pre-COVID, I'm not talking about that, but like hanging out with, like going to these places has become more of an Epicurean, bizarre thing to do. It's not mainstream for big Broadway performers, but back then. Anyway, New Year's Eve, who would in their right mind would go to Times Square on New Year's Eve? But I was new in New York. So I went with my then roommate to backstage, to Ted Hook's backstage, where the elite meet. With Steve Ross playing the white grand piano in the front room and the back. Oh my God, show business heaven. And it was packed, of course, New Year's Eve. And I was like pulling my chair and sitting on the corner of a table and trying to stay out of everyone's way. And then I was really in someone's way. And I really had to move. And I was like, and I was like pulling my chair aside and stepping aside. And like these people pushed by me. It was like, and I looked up like, really? Do we really need to be like that? I looked up and it was Ann Miller. I'll move. And then with her was Ann Miller. I believe it was Mickey Rooney. because they were doing Sugar Babies at the time. And with them was Ethel Merman. And I looked up at the three of them, and I'm a kid in New York for the first time, and I thought, now I've moved to New York. Little did I know I'd be meeting them soon enough in another context. But so
now Matthew is here, who is one of your biggest fans from Miss Gulch Returns.
Oh, yeah.
You know who I'm talking about?
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm Adam.
But how did the whole concept and the idea of Miss Gulch Returns happens? I know I'm jumping around, but I want to get as much in as we can. How did that happen? And were you really surprised at the major impact that it made at the time that it did?
Yes and no. And some of the best things in one's career are like, I did all that other stuff and I actually like didn't love all of it. But that was just some crazy thing I did, and I had no idea what it was going to be. It's not as if I sat down and said one day, like, I think I'll write a little review, a one-man review about Miss Gulch from The Wizard of Oz. No, that did not happen. Never. What happened was I had moved to LA with Forbidden Broadway. I went out there with the show in 1983. And two things happened that summer, as I'm sure you remember. The refurbished A Star Is Born came out with the extra footage that had never been seen, and the still photographs, and this, like, it was the restored A Star Is Born. And I went to the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences and saw like the brand new print. And in the audience, and they got up and spoke with James Mason, like the
Radio City Music Hall version of that.
Well, they did this little tour, and Judy's three children were there, and James Mason spoke. Sid Luft was there, and anyone who was connected to the film in any way was there.
Or Hollywood.
And that's the night I met Nelson Riddle for the first time, which is another story. Anyway, then the other thing that happened the summer of '83 in Los Angeles is that Al Jean Harmatz put out a book about the making of The Wizard of Oz, and she held a symposium at the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences. And in attendance on the panel, Ray Bolger, Ken Darby, who created all the Munchkin voices and so forth, Ray Bolger, Margaret Hamilton, and some other people who were involved, one of the Munchkins, some other people who were involved. And in the audience was the producer of that film, of The Wizard of Oz, Mervyn LeRoy. Anyway, when Margaret Hamilton was introduced last, and she made her entrance from the side, and let me tell you, you have never heard applause. You've never heard a place combust like this, just explosive. And what struck me is that she was, you know, she has some one-liners that she would do in interviews and stuff. She was very entertaining, very warm and entertaining. And then she got to like where she was in her head and her heart at that moment. And she was so, she stopped being witty for entertainment purposes and started to really speak from the heart. And I thought, oh my God, the most warm, philosophical, incredible person in that entire cast turns out to be the West.
Exactly.
Miss Gulch. And it was really amazing. And because she said, I remember she said, you know, I've lost everything. My husband's dead. My son's dead. My family's gone. And it's just me, but I still have them. They're still here. They're here. And there, you could have heard a pin drop in that place. Anyway, that struck me. Okay, so now we have those two twin events. Then, very briefly, a friend of mine had an audition at the Mel Brooks studio at Fox, at 20th Century Fox, and to write a couple songs. And they were looking specifically, the one song I remember, the director was Amy Heckerling, and it was for a Michael Keaton film. And they were looking for a number that the leading lady would sing in a bar. And surrounded by, like, she's the only woman in the bar, and she's surrounded by a bunch of, like, petty criminals and low life and so forth. And I sat there, and I played my friend's audition, and then I sat there. From their reaction, I could tell, okay, I know what that song's going to be. I know just what that song should be. And the director, Amy, even said, I want it to sound like a little bit like Cole Porter's Let's Misbehave. I was like, And I thought, you know why this isn't my audition? It's my friend's, but it's not mine. Because I haven't written. I can't be jealous. I can't like do all those show business things you do in your head because I haven't written and I deserve not to have this audition. But I thought, why haven't I written? And I went home and in my crummy hotel room, the room where Janis Joplin died, if you can believe that, and I'm not kidding. I said, if I'm so smart, if I'm so great, I'm so talented, write the song. And I talked to myself like, okay, put up or shut up, write the song if you're so smart. And I sat at my desk and I just started to muse, like, what would a woman alone in a bar, but surrounded by men, sing? What would the song be? And I was like, okay, the only person you can talk to in a bar when no one's talking to you is the bartender, right? That's it. And I thought, okay, what does she talk with the bartender about? It's like, oh, pour me another, I started going through a list of drinks in my head. Like, what do you talk to your bartender about? You start with a drink. Could you pour me a this, that, the other thing? And I was like, whiskey. It was like scotch. How about a this? How about a that? And I was making a list of them on the page, the way songwriters do. And then I was getting tired. My mind just slipped. And I was writing literally, pour me, and I was going to write a like ginger and soda or something. And I accidentally pour me a man. I was like, oh, no, wait. I skipped a few things there. And then I stopped. But pour me a man. Pour me a man. I said, I think that's funny. I wasn't sure. But in literally half an hour, I had written the song. And I didn't know it was any good until I got back to New York. And I played it for some friends. And they were all screaming about it. And I wrote it for other people to sing. But no one would sing it. So a frustrating thing when you're a songwriter, you've just written a great song and no one wants to sing it. So I thought, okay, I'll have to sing it myself. And I'd written some other songs on a jag. I just went on a jag and wrote some songs. And I thought, but they're all for women. I write well for women. I was like, I can't sing these songs unless as a woman. And it's like, especially 1983, remember, La Cage had just opened on Broadway. So like drag was not a thing except one or two people in the piano bars. It was not a thing. And I thought, I really didn't want to put on a dress. I thought I'm really putting it out there if I do that. But I thought, oh, wait a minute. What about that Miss Gulch character I did? And at Summerstock, I had played Miss Gulch and the Wicked Witch in The Wizard of Oz. So I thought, what if I get up in that Miss Gulch thing and just do it as her? So you see how it was, connect the dots. Like, how can I do this? And I've got this song. And what about, I'm going to have to put on a dress. What kind of dress? Oh, her. Yeah. And then I wrote a little connective tissue, a couple words, a little to get from song to song. And I did the show in the Forbidden Broadway room, which at that time was called Paulson's and is now called The Triad.
The Triad.
And it was mine for the having because I was doing Forbidden Broadway there. And I did it without a clue what I had. And I thought, okay, Miss Gulch is funny for 5 minutes, but for an hour. And boy, that first performance, I still have a tape of it. And even when it was trying to see it, we're like, okay, let's see Fred's little Miss Gulch show. And I was like, and afterwards they were looking at me with wide open eyes and open mouth, like. And then I thought, oh, I guess I did a thing. And then I took it from Triad. Then I went to do Don't Tell Mama, and I did it there for a while. In the interim, by the way, the show was originally called Miss Gulch Lives! ! Margaret Hamilton died, like literally while I was doing the show. And she knew about it because two friends of hers, John Fricke. Oh, yeah. You know John? Yeah. For those of you out there who don't know John Fricke, he was originally like this Oz expert. He wrote a book on the making and the 75th anniversary.
Which is where you and I met.
That's exactly it. I was wondering if you remember that. We were both online to have John sign our copies. And the reason I was particularly getting mine signed was because he wrote up my show in the book as one of the offshoots of The Wizard of Oz. Anyway, they got the program of my show to Margaret Hamilton, and she thought they reported to me that, she thought it was a funny idea that someone would pick up on that part of the character and so forth. But she passed away.
No.
And oh my God, I had just spent a fortune on those posters all over town. You know, remember how you used to put posters around town?
Mm-hmm.
Now they don't allow it. But I immediately like retitled the show and put up new posters. And I changed it to Miss Gulch Returns. And that is why it's called that.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And then I thought in those days, people did like a club act 2 Tuesdays in November. That's it. And I was like, 2 Tuesdays in November? I don't want to keep doing this. I'm just like, and fortunately, I got together with the Mark Allen and the people at the Duplex, the real Duplex, as I call it. The old one, where everyone got their start. Barbara Streisand, Woody Allen, Joan Rivers, everybody started there. And they let me book week to week to week. And that's how I was able to achieve a long run, which was unheard of in cabaret in those days. I also hired a Broadway press agent. No one did that in those days. It wasn't cheap.
No.
But I was putting my money where my mouth was. I thought, I think this is good. And I kept getting in the press. Now, remember, those days, every paper in town and every TV station in town covered cabaret.
That's right.
None of them do now, which I think is just awful. But it's because the newspapers don't have a budget. They have, they're so limited now in what they can do. They just don't cover it all. And but I got a ton of coverage, national coverage. So one thing led to another, and that's how the show became something of an institution. And then I put out the record album, which somebody else produced for me. I was like, I wouldn't have had the nerve to do that. I was like, let's do it. And a couple years later, I had left on the road. I kind of let Miss Gulch go and went on to my conducting and all that. And they started to do Miss Gulch at random theaters, gay theaters around the country. And there are a million of them. Every town has the gay theater, 99 seats or whatever it is. And I thought, okay, do it. They asked me, could we do it? Yeah, sure. And I started to want, when I could, I'd go and see these productions, and they were so much fun. So it grew into this thing. And that CD is still selling on Amazon to this day. I just got another order. And what was that? That was started in 83. So that was almost, I can't do the math, 40 years ago? Something like that.
Mm-hmm.
If you had whispered to me the night in that LA hotel room when I was writing For Me a Man off the top of my head without any clue it was going to be Miss Gulch, that it would still be around. It's sung in cabarets on 3 continents. They sing it in England. They sing it in Australia. They sing it in cabarets around New York. I've many times walked into
I have a friend in San Francisco, and it's his theme song.
There you go.
Yeah, he sings it everywhere he goes. So Bruce Phillips, if you're watching this,
That's great. And many times I've gone into a piano bar thinking, okay, when I get up to the piano, when I do my song, I'm going to kill this room because I'm going to do Pour Me a Man. And literally 5 seconds after I arrive, somebody gets up and does Pour Me a Man. So it kills my act. But
do you remember the first time that you were in a piano bar or a cabaret room and someone got up and sang the song not knowing that you were there?
There were a couple instances. Once was in Wilmington, Delaware. I was on the road doing, forget what show. And, I did 5 national tours of Broadway shows. So I got around a bit during those years. Anyway, we were in Wilmington, Delaware, and this very large queen de drag got up into this gay club and was lip syncing Pour Me a Man with a great big boa and a cocktail glass, 9 foot, a foot tall. And she was lip syncing to my recording.
I love it.
I freaked out.
I love it.
So I then introduced myself to her after her show, and she freaked out. And then they were doing another benefit, an AIDS benefit, the following week. I showed up, she sang the song, and it was just too much fun. But the main time this is one of the most important things that happened to me in my life was after Debbie Reynolds cheered me up, I went out for the first time in years. This was in the early 90s. And I had heard about this club in downtown called 88's. supposedly the flagship of the piano bars. And I was like, okay, I really didn't want to go, but I thought I have to get out of the apartment. So I went down there on a miserable night, cold, rainy, everything. And I sat at the end of the bar, and the bartender gave me my scotch, neat. And there was this lady sitting next to me who was engaged in conversation. And then one of the waitresses, you know, the waitresses get up and sing. One of the waitresses got up and sang, "Booze, Mama Told Me." And I jumped. I hadn't been in a piano bar in a couple of years. And it was like 5 seconds after I arrive, that happens. And a friend of mine, she saw that I jumped. She didn't know me at all. And she said, "Oh, I love this song." And I said to her, as the composer lyricist of that song, I must say I agree with you. And the woman next to me turned out to be a future best friend, Maggie Worth.
Oh my God!
That's how I met Maggie Worth. She was just randomly sitting next to me when I jumped when that song was sung.
Well, I have to ask you: do you know Dana Lorge?
Did
you know Dana?
Mm-hmm.
Dana and I performed together for years. She unfortunately passed away, but she was one of the most flamboyant people. She was a female drag queen. I mean, she lived for glitz and glitter and everything. Yeah, and the first time I met her, we were at a party at Phyllis Raskin's. Remember Phyllis Raskin?
Yes.
She was my publicist. And we were at a party at her house. And this guy was playing the piano. I had never met Dana before in my life. I said, "Why don't you get up and sing a song?" She says, "I do very obscure material. He's not going to know what I know." And I said, "No, just get up and sing." So I bring her over to the piano. And I said, "This is my new friend, Dana Lorge. Why don't you get her up to sing?" And she says, "I only do obscure material." And he says, "Well, throw me a title." And she says, "I'd love to hate myself in the morning."
Oh.
And he said, "I wrote that song. It was John Mayer."
John Mayer.
And she said, "Of course you wrote that song."
John Mayer is a dear friend of mine.
Yes. And he started to play the song, and she almost fell over, and I'll never forget that.
That's a great story.
We still laugh about that. But we're going to run out of time here. I want you to come back.
Oh, yeah.
So many stories.
I just wanted to say one thing, just very quickly, because of the tape you showed earlier. A lot of that was from my concert series when I had Broadway stars and friends of mine and various really great people. I said, you know, we're New York and we do piano bar well, but what about the show music is written and intended to be performed by an orchestra, always and exclusively. And I thought, we're New York. Why aren't we doing that? So I assembled an orchestra, and it grew. The event grew, but got some people involved. Got some, people like Karen Ziemba, Terry White, like Broadway names and Broadway adjacent names. And they would come down. We do these concerts, 27 songs a night with the full orchestra. I did all the orchestrations from scratch, right up to the morning of the concert. So that was what all of that was. And I hope I can do it again.
You will.
When the dust clears, Orchestra playing is its own unique problem with COVID because wind players, it's concentrated air. So you need to do a lot. It would probably require a lot of plastic and all of that. And singing itself is one of the more dangerous activities.
Exactly. Are you doing a lot of writing at this time?
I wish I could say yes, but I really went into, how shall I describe? Like a funk. I just went into a slow motion when there's nothing to write for. I was always like end result oriented. Like I'm writing for so-and-so to perform at the such and such, and here is the song. And without someone to write for or an occasion to write for, I'm just sitting at the piano like, I barely remember who I am as a writer. Every now and then I sit down and like, what about this? What about this? And I keep the machine on the iPhone on to capture the ideas because I never sit down to like write this kind of music. I just sit down, turn on the machine in case I forget something, and just improvise on the piano. And some of my best songs have come from those, like, my mind goes into a trance. I let my fingers do the walking and talking, and I just go wherever they go. And so I'm not one of those like task-oriented, I've got to write a cha-cha. You know, I just write what my fingers tell me to. And then my brain free associates, sometimes the lyric first, sometimes the music.
Now I have a question for you from one of our viewers, and then I've got one last question that I want to ask you.
Yeah.
And he says, can you ask Fred that maybe he could post more 1980s Miss Gulch Returns videos on YouTube?
That's Matthew. Right.
That's not you.
The problem with that, I do have a lot of videos, but when I was doing Miss Gulch, I frequently had it taped. And one of the problems is that we were in the dark ages of media. Mm-hmm. I mean, I had just bought my first VCR when I was doing Miss Gulch Returns. And so it's not as if you had an iPhone in your pocket and you could just like film stuff.
Would you consider revisiting it and going into a studio and recording the show as a live stream event? Yeah,
I actually have thought of it. And before COVID, like I forget, it was like May 2019. So 2 years ago, mm-hmm. a friend of mine, Austin, at Austin Cabaret Theater, you know, Stuart Molson?
Stuart Moulton, who we love.
Yeah, well, he asked me to do Miss Gulch, and I said no. I said, no, Stuart, I appreciate it, but I haven't done it in 15 years. And I just don't think, and I didn't want the first thing I did after 15 years to be that again. But he talked me into it, and I thought, you know what? This would be good for me. I've been sitting around. Low accomplishment for some years. That was even before COVID. I thought, I'm going to do this. I am going to, once again, I had to like, if you're so smart, do it. So I put it together again. I had a new voice teacher who's fabulous, Neil Harrelson. And I put it together again. And I was worried it wouldn't hold up. Obviously, we've got Me Too and we've got all these issues. And I thought, oh my God, no one's going to think this is funny. And I read it through for the first time and I laughed out loud. Me, myself, my 24-year-old self was making my 60-something self laugh. And
that is great.
Change one word of it to take in any new issues. It was already built in.
Well, George Dvorsky and Sally Mays, just for the Paper Mill Playhouse, just did Pete and Keeley, revisiting it 20 plus years later.
I saw that. And I had a similar show at one time with Tony DeBono, who I did Forbidden Broadway with, called The Two Svengalis. Mm-hmm. And we have a great record album, and that also has been done at other theaters with other people. But we were kind of kneecapped. Part of it was my fault. I moved to LA at the critical moment. But I love the fact that George and Sally were doing that again. Mm-hmm. So yeah, and I have thought of it because, by the way, I went to Austin, Texas, to the Cabaret Theater, and I did the show. And I was, I didn't know how I was going to go after all these years. Like a 24-year-old playing an old woman is funny. But is like a 60-year-old woman, is that funny?
Oh, Fred, yes, and you are ageless.
Oh, thanks. But yeah, so I thought, of course, COVID sort of interrupted that. Mm-hmm. That's the least of our problems with COVID, I know. But I was thinking, if I could find the right space. But now it's not a cabaret show anymore. It's theater. It turned into theater at some point along the line. Mm-hmm. So I need to find Black Boxer as like a theater where I could do it, not just with the waiters giving the drinks and all that.
Exactly. Well, I've got one last question before we wrap everything up. And since you've been in New York since 1980, the business has changed a lot. What are some of the things that you love most that have changed in the business? What are the things that you like the least? And beyond the people that we've lost along the way, what do you miss the most about what New York and the business was like when you first came to New York?
Well, we've touched on the last part of that already, which is that I love my internet. I love my iPhone, but I really hate what they did to the nightlife. Now, part of it was AIDS. There were a lot of factors working, against each other, but I do think it was the internet that was the death knell of our age of cabaret and piano bar. There are still obviously piano bars and cabarets out there, but they are, as you had mentioned earlier, a completely different animal from, I sound old as hell, like your and my day. It's quite different. And so I miss those days. And it was also it generated stardom of a certain kind. Mm-hmm. Like, I remember the first time I heard of Karen Mason
Yes.
In the cabaret. Like she was a headliner in the cabarets. And you could do that. Like you built a following. And then, I mean, when I went to see her, there were people lined up all the way down the street. When was the last time you saw that?
Exactly.
For someone in the cabaret world, I don't mean like she hadn't done Broadway yet. She hadn't done all that. And so I miss the outlet that cabaret provided. And what you said earlier was so true. The congregation. Please remember, open your hymnals to the congregation of cabaret. And part of that, I miss the gay ghetto. I know that sounds terrible. I wrote a song about it, actually, which I will put out soon, called I Loved the Cruise.
We mirror it here.
Oh, yeah. And well, but I do miss, I know, I'm glad we have rights. I'm glad all of the progress has been made. But there's a little baby with bathwater situation. Like I miss some of the old ghetto where we could come together and we all had something very unique and common, a common culture. That's partly what the inheritance was about.
Exactly.
And like inheriting the culture from a previous generation of gay men, handing it down, that all got messed up. And as for what I love now, that's hard for me to say. Like, I don't love Broadway now unless like it comes up with a sensational play every now and then. Even a sensational musical every now and then, although I like nothing of what other people like. And I tend to like what closes, like the Scottsboro Boys, to me, greatest show on earth. Shocked that it closed. The other one I saw, Bright Star. I seem to be the only one in New York who loved Bright Star. And I loved it. And everyone was beep, 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 beep. And that's just my wacko taste, I guess. But I miss old Broadway too. And I think a lot of people do because it's gotten so unwieldy. And there's a lot of talk about Broadway now online, as you've probably seen. And but again, baby with bathwater. I think they like threw away something to get something else, and ultimately destructive.
I agree with you. I totally agree with everything you've just said. I'm right there with you. We are at the end. We've actually gone a little over today. I love you. I want you to back here.
Oh, sure.
I want to thank everybody for being here today. If you did indeed like today's show, and if you haven't done so already, please subscribe to Richard Skipper Celebrates on YouTube. And also hit the like button for this show because it really helps elevate this. It will, more and more people will see it. Share it with your friends. Tell everyone if you are around tomorrow night at 5 o'clock, I am going to be celebrating Tito Puente Jr. So I am excited about sitting down and talking with him. I also end every show by asking everyone to go out and do something nice for somebody else without expecting anything in return. Go to your Facebook friends list if you're on Facebook and reach out to, let's say, the fourth name on your list. Pick up the phone and call that person. Or go to your Rolodex if you still have a Rolodex. Call the fourth person and just say, I'm reaching out to see how you're doing. Not an email, not a text message, not an inbox message. Think about what life was like for Fred and I in 1984.
With no gadgets, we actually had to go be with real people.
Yes, reach out, especially now. As my dear friend David Friedman says, we're all in this together, but we're not in the same boat. You never know what someone else is going through. Yeah. And before we end, I'm going to give you the final word, and then I've got a special treat for everybody that you've shared with us. So I hope you've all stuck around for that. Anything that you want to say to everyone to build upon anything that we've said today that you want to add to, anything that we didn't talk about that you wish we had, or just any message that you want to put out to everyone right now. I'm going to leave the screen. You've got the screen to yourself. It's your platform. Okay. And then we're going to end with a special song. Oh, so thank you, Fred, for being here.
Thank you, Richard. It's been great. So hi, everybody. I have missed you so much. And, you know, these CDs behind me, don't cut it. I mean, I'm glad I have them, but I miss you. I miss being with people. And I practically saw nobody. I mean, everybody went away. And I went away too. And this is one of the dangers I found, that a lot of people I know have stopped communicating because it takes a lot. It takes a lot to like, I'm terrible with the email. Anyway, get out. And now there are bars. My favorite bar is now open for business. And I'm going there like 4 or 5 nights a week. And everybody's vaccinated. And they have they're doing it by the book. Only a certain number of people are allowed in, and it's distance spaced and all that stuff. You can go out now. And if we've learned anything over the last year, I don't mean to sound pontificating, but we learned anything, it's the value of seeing real people. And now that you can go out, I go out for dinner now, and I know the places that do it right. Reach out and touch someone. Who was that dreadful phrase written for? Yeah, do it. And it takes an extra effort. Oddly enough, we're not exploding out of our houses to do it. You'd think we would be, but actually not. I'm a little withdrawn still. My friends are a little withdrawn, some a lot withdrawn. And so it takes the effort to go out. And just keep in mind, remember the life before gadgets. And it's very incomplete. I learned the hard way at one point that, you know what you're looking at right now? Ones and zeros on a glass screen, nothing else. Looks like me, doesn't it? It's ones and zeros. So keep in touch with the ones and zeros, but better to like be in the same room with someone, which you now can do. So, and the cabarets are opening again. Go see someone sing. So many of them are outdoors, like you can just sit outside and totally safe. So what good is sitting alone in your room when you can sit alone at a computer? That's my little gag for now. Anyway, it was wonderful to see you all, and I hope to see you all in person in the real world real soon. Okay? Bye, everybody.
So instead of the mild-mannered Harvard graduate that you see before you, may I make myself comfortable? I just think instead, if you wouldn't mind just sort of picturing Miss Gulch in front of you, and I will...
told me booze can keep you happy till you're 6 feet under grass. And though I've toasted Mom in heaven since I was 6 or 7, my happiness has yet to come to pass. When I find I'm hot to trot, Ma's advice goes down real nice, but it just don't hit the spot. No, there's one drink they can't sell me. Bitch forgot to tell me. A man doesn't come in a glass. What good is whiskey? I've been through the best in the bar. Whiskey ain't got whiskers wrapped around a cigar. Pour me a face black with bristle. Watch me wet my whistle. Just pour me a man. What good is scotch, whether it's with or without the old twist? Scotch ain't got a watch around its hairy left wrist. Pour me a bulging bicep bastard. I'm terribly sorry, but watch me get plastered. Just pour me a man. Liquor, they say, is quicker, they say. But what I want's even quicker, and it's thicker. What good is beer? I've had enough to fill Niagara Falls. But beers ain't got 2 ears, 2 eyes, 2 arms, 2 legs under a pair of overalls. Pour me a mug with a head on top. I'll chug him drop by drop and make him last as long as I can. Pour me a thug, pockmarked and pit-faced. I'll still end up shit-faced. Pour me a straight up, better make it a stiff one. Pour me a double, nothing but trouble.